Hello gamers, it's Monday, May the 4th, and once again we're doing the Macedonians of Alexander the Great, taking on the late Achaemenid Persians of Darius III, and this time, for a change, the previous two battles I did, the Persians were the defenders, now the Macedonians are the defenders. That means that they set up first, but they get to move first. Also, I've tried to create a battlefield this time which is not so obviously skewed towards one side, having lodging themselves in a nice comfortable position and just sitting around and waiting there. We have one terrain piece, and again, it's taken me a while to realize that as much as I love the DBA system, it's not necessarily for me to play DBA battles as if they were a competition game. So I don't choose the terrain the way the rules would for a competition game. And I will probably, the other thing I've thought about doing is also playing battles with asymmetric forces. So my one side might have 14 elements, for example, rather than 12. The other side might have 10 elements rather than 12. Set up a scenario, that sort of thing. DBA scenarios is something that I have very, very much underexplored. I've always played DBA battles as 12 elements against 12 or 24 against 24, that sort of thing. Anyway, going back to this particular battle, starting to wander there. We've got one terrain feature, which is which is an area of bad going here. And I've placed it pretty much right in the center of the battlefield. And the Macedonians, as I said, deployed first. Take a quick look at their deployment. I'll just pause this for a second. So they had to deploy first. And what I wanted to do was to give them a chance to react to the fast-moving forces of the Persians. So I didn't put them up front. I've held them back from the position that they could have been, which would have been rather further forward. So what they've done is they've deployed their light troops, as we might expect. We've got these troops here. The light troops are ready to move forward into the bad going. We've got the light horse on the end, ready to go up the extreme right flank, if that seems to be the right thing to do. We've got the slow-moving artillery, as usual, forming a sort of a bridge between those troops and the main forces of the phalanx. Also, though, just in a general position where we figure that they're going to have something interesting to shoot at. One of the best things for them to shoot at, frankly, is the Persian peltasts, but that is to say the auxilia. And then we have the phalanx, which I've strung out in a single line because I learned from the previous game that they can give a pretty good account of themselves against mounted troops. In fact, against most of what the Persians have to throw at them in a single line. And then I've got a second line unit here, basically in the center, so that it can be pushed sideways to reinforce where necessary if the single line looks threatened. And then down at the end here, we've got Alexander himself. And then on the very end, a unit of cavalry, which incidentally, as a side note, are the Thessalians, which I painted myself. So there they are in all their glory. And I did notice, actually, I don't know, these Macedonians here, all the way down to here, and also these figures are figures that I purchased, painted, and this one, of course, the artillery I did myself, and this one down. So that's Essex. Make a mental note there. That's Essex, and these are Essex as well. And these are a different manufacturer. I don't know what manufacturer they are, but sadly, it is apparent if you take the time to look. Now I'm going to draw attention to it, of course. We can see that if I focus in on that a little bit, we can see that the Thessalians are a bit bigger than the rest of the army. I've got a complete and unpainted Essex DBA army, and I started out by painting the Thessalians. So of course, not all manufacturers are exactly the same size, even though they're supposed to be. But there we go. So that's the Macedon deployment, and now we'll take a quick look at the Persians. Pause for a second. And so the Persians, being the attacker, deployed second. They decided they've got fast-moving troops, and they want to bring the battle to the Macedonians as quickly as possible, because the Macedonians essentially have slow-moving troops. So they've deployed as far forward as they can go, and not surprisingly, they've put their light troops on their left flank here, so that they will be ideally suited to moving around in and around the bad going over here. And then, of course, we've got faster moving troops over here with the light cavalry right at the end. We've got Darius in the center. We've got the mercenary hoplites and the infamous horde, which often doesn't move at all in the battle because it requires 2 points and is not a particularly exciting unit. Often gets left behind. So yes, the hoplites in the center, as it were. I put the side chariots here so that they could be fairly certain of being able to go forward into the phalanx, because that's the one that they want to get to grips with, because they have a quick kill on pikemen. And then as they deployed second, I was able to actually quite deliberately line up these Persian knights here opposite Alexander, who is, of course, also a unit of knights. So that means that if they are in contact with Alexander, it means that he has only got a +1 on them, as opposed to the +2 he would have on cavalry and the +3 that he would have on light cavalry. So that's what the alignment is going for there. And then down towards the end, we've got, of course, more Persian cavalry and, not surprisingly, light horse on the extreme right flank, so that they can mix it up down here in flanking maneuvers. And that's the situation before the battle begins. And here's the Macedonian first turn. Alexander rolled 6 pips. Plenty of scope there. So the light cavalry, actually, I suppose they moved second. The first thing that happened was the Macedonian right flank light troops here have moved forward just one move towards the bad going. If I'd had more pips, I would have put them into it, but we wanted to then give 3 pips of movement to the Macedonian light horse, who have gone all the way up here, 3 full turns, and they're up here. They're trying to stay away from the Persian Siloi, who can roam around. Well, they can both roam around. The Siloi are faster. Roam around over here and try and block the movement of the light horse. So the light horse are up there now, generally being able to cause problems of some kind. They have an interesting combat if they face off against the horde, because the horde has a factor of 2 against mounted, so they're worth 2, so it'll be 2 versus 2. But the horde would let's see here. Yeah, the horde cannot destroy. They cannot destroy the light horse, but the light horse can destroy the horde. So fair enough. So they might have a go at the horde, or just generally wander around and create nuisance of themselves. But basically, it's getting them involved without getting tangled in the bad going. And that's necessary because, of course, the Persians have got 3 light troops over here, and Alexandria have only got these 2. So I need all 3 units of the Alexandrians to be able to work together in this area. Okay, so that was 3 pips, 4 pips, and then I had 2 pips remaining, which I used then to move the main battle line forward. And just one moment here, pause. So the line wheeled, basically. Essentially, I'm trying to keep the flank back for as long as I can, because there's a lot of Persian mounted troops who would love to go around the flank as soon as possible. Trying to get the artillery into range as soon as possible, and trying to get the phalanx into action as soon as possible as well. So that's why we're going forward this way. And there is, of course, no shooting. Macedonians are the only ones with missile weapons, and they can only shoot if they did not move. So that's the end of the Macedonian bound. It's the Persian first bound, and Darius also rolled 6 for pips. Plenty of scope there, as I always like to say, apparently. So what the Persians did was they basically used only 3 pips. They moved this section of the main battle line straight forward at a speed of 3 base widths. The slowest moving unit, of course, determines the speed of the group, and the slowest moving unit is the knights right here. Otherwise, they would have been able to move 4. So they moved 3 straight forward. They like what they see in front of them. And then over here, this group moved 2 forward. And then the Persian light cavalry that were behind these moved into this position here to pose a bit of a problem for the extreme left end of the Macedonian flank. The Thessalians here are in a position to start mixing it up with the light cavalry, but of course if they break off and do that, they're going to find that they're going to get more Persians coming up against them and so forth. So the idea with these is to menace the flank. In other words, if the Macedonians just come forward, they're going to be ready to pounce on the flank. And if the Macedonians don't watch what's happening, they can, of course, go around the flank as well. Over here, and that was all that Darius chose to do. He chose not to do any more moves with all those pips he had, including not to send the Siloi here, who were making their first move, so could have moved twice further into the bad going, because I figured if I did, they would simply be more isolated than they are at the moment, so I chose not to do that. Now, the one problem with all this is that it hasn't addressed in any way the Macedonian light horse who are over here on the flank. But the main thing that's been treated as, at least for the first turn or so, is that the theory, at least, is that they can't cause very much trouble. First of all, they're going to have to turn around, and then if they move, so they're facing, as it were, in the wrong direction. They're facing that way, so they're going to have to turn around. That's going to take them time, and then if they move up here, they're not even going to be able to get within distance to be able to pin one of the Persians, but they certainly will be able to come up here and start menacing the Persian, the rear of the Persian left flank. Now, because the Persians have just surged ahead here, it definitely means that the Macedonian artillery has a target-rich environment, I believe it's called, in the sense that, let's see, we just take a quick look at that. Yeah, they can shoot in their turn, as long as they don't move. They can shoot at the auxilia or the Siloi or the mercenary hoplites. So that's interesting. And then also an interesting footnote is that always to remember that on the first turn, those units which would take an extra pip to move don't require that. So we didn't need an extra pip to move the horde, and we didn't need an extra pip to move the side chariot. And of course, remember, these will always be 2 pips to move thereafter, and the side chariot are 2 pips to move if their move does not end in hand-to-hand combat. Yes, right. Okay, or close combat, yeah. So that's the end of the Persian bound. Okay, Macedonian bound, and Alexander rolled high again, 5 pips, and took the light horse that were over here and moved them twice, 1, 2, so they're now directly behind the Persian center. So they're going to be giving Darius something to think about there. And then over here on the Macedonian right, the Hypaspists and the Siloi have moved into the bad going to be in a position to menace the Persian left. The Hypaspists have held back deliberately to the extent that the Persians will not be able to make contact with them in the next move. So they're basically there to limit the movement. Persians, if they want to, of course, they can start now lining up to get lined up to have a go at the Macedonian light troops, but that's all going to take time. It's all going to use up pips, and they've got the Macedonian light horse directly behind them to worry about. And as I've said before, the light horse, in terms of combat factors, are in a position where they are able to destroy the horde here. Well, of course, we have to remember with the horde, although it's one of the 12 units of the Persian army, it does not count towards the victory conditions. Other than that, nothing has changed. So now we do actually have some combat now. We have shooting. The Macedonian artillery are choosing to shoot at the what they consider to be the best target, which is the Persian auxilia. Right, so the artillery are with 4 and the auxilia with 3. We'll roll them up, and as usual, the Persian dice is red, and let's see what we get. Well, the Persians won that one, so that's no effect on anybody. So there we are. And now it's the Persian mound. It's Darius's turn, and once again rolled a 6. Lot of scope. So Darius used the lot, as a matter of fact. Decided to take a unit of light horse, the one that was out here, and go. It was past the flank of the Thessalians, so they were allowed to charge the Thessalians in the flank, which meant that the Thessalians turned to face. So it's not a flanking attack; it's a face-to-face attack. But the Thessalians have got the issue that if they have to recoil, in this latest version of the rules, they can recoil into their friends and stop. That's fine, but they can't do it again. If they start in that position, then they will be destroyed. So we'll see what happens there. Of course, the light horse are worth 2. Thessalian cavalry, they're worth 3. So we'll see what happens. Light cavalry move forward to stop Alexander, at least from coming on this side, to get into a position here to form an overlap on the next turn because of their threat zone here. If I think I just tweaked that. If he comes out, he'd have to go into the threat zone, so he'd have to deal with them. The battle line moved forward, not its full distance, because that would have meant that the left flank of the battle line would have been out here and completely unprotected. So it basically it wheeled forward, and Darius moved forward as far as he could, whilst remaining in contact more or less with the hoplites. Then, not surprisingly, the horde didn't move. Neither did the Siloi, but the auxilia have moved into a position to try to influence what happens over here. Okay, and the Macedonian light horse still have great freedom of movement over here. So we do have combat. We've got the Persian light cavalry up against the Scythians, as it is, or the Scythians, up against the Thessalians. So Persian 2 against Macedonian 3, and we'll see what we get out of that lot. I'll just pause for a second.